So, the reason this is the best backpacking pan is because it's better than a Frybake. And a Frybake is it's the pan that's used in America by people willing to carry it because it just works so good. And if this pan is better than a Frybake, then it just must be the best frying pan for backpackers. And this pan is better than a Frybake because it's as close to this as you can get for weight. This piece of garbage weighs an ounce, so you can't do any better than an ounce. But of course, this is a piece of garbage. And this is a solid metal pan that weighs 4.2 ounces. Now, a Frybake weighs 8 ounces, and that's a lot of weight. So, if you can find a pan that's as close to this as you can get, while still being as close to this as you can get, that's what you want. And you know, the thinking in America has been that the Frybake is that pan, right? As light as it can possibly be, while still being as close to a real frying pan as it can possibly be. But in fact, this pan is much closer in weight to this, while actually being just as functional as the Frybake in regards to copying what this thing can do. So let's see, the Frybake is made out of hard anodized aluminum, and this is regular aluminum. I mean, this is regular anodized aluminum. So the difference there is that the hard anodized Frybake is going to be more scratch resistant. You cannot scratch it. This thing can be scratched. However, even if you bought a Frybake, you should still season it so that it's more non-stick. And if you're going to do that, you still won't be able to scratch it because you're not going to want to wreck your seasoned coating. So in that regard, it really doesn't matter if this is anodized instead of hard anodized. But the advantage of using regular anodized aluminum is that it is lighter, because hard anodized aluminum requires a thicker aluminum. So with this simple little pan, they've just used 18 gauge aluminum, and so it's as light as it can possibly be, and they've anodized it, so it's as tough as it can be. And the argument about not being able to scratch the pan has been talked about, but the other argument is that why do you need the pan to be any harder than hard enough? And if this pan can't be crushed or stepped on, then it's hard enough. But another nice argument for anodized instead of hard anodized is that it's cheaper. Hard anodized gets pretty expensive, and this is less than half the price of a Frybake. But talking about, so the surface area on a Frybake it's bigger. You've got about 50 square inches of space on a Frybake, and this is about 25 square inches. I forget the exact numbers, but the surface area on the bottom of the pan is about half on this pan instead of the Frybake. So this thing, you can put 2 eggs in there, and a Frybake you could put 4 in there. But the Frybake is actually, it's actually too big for a canister stove. A canister stove is really just not designed to function well with big frying pans because the flame is just too small. So this particular Fat Daddio's pan, the size that it is, it just works so efficiently with one of these little canister stoves that you just can't ignore how efficient it is, because the heat just travels across the surface really well because it's not too long. But if you're baking a loaf of bread in here, the heat travels up the side really well, so you get a nice crust on your bread, and you're able to cook a loaf of bread in this pan. So it works really well with the size flame that you're working with on a canister stove. But in addition to those points, a bigger pan, you can cook a loaf of bread on a bigger pan, in a bigger pan, but it takes longer. I've used a bigger pan than this. I bought a couple of Fat Daddio's pans, and when I was using their 9-inch pan that's 5 inches wide, the loaf of bread took twice as long to cook on higher heat. So it's using a lot more fuel. So with this pan, I'm cooking on a lower heat, and I'm cooking for half the time. And that's with a loaf of bread that's only about 25% smaller than the bigger pan, because the bigger pan is wider and longer, but it's also shorter. So because this pan has that extra ½ inch of height from other Fat Daddio's pans, and because the heat travels up the side quite efficiently on this narrow pan, it really maximizes how big you can cook your loaf of bread in, so that this pan will cook a 3 cups of flour loaf of bread instead of their 9-inch pan by 5 inches wide, which only cooks a 4 cups loaf of bread. So this pan is just perfect in every way, with its size and materials, that it just can't be ignored. So I wanted to share it with everybody. And what else can I say about it? It doesn't come with a lid, of course, because it's just for bakers to bake bread. But you can just buy a cheap little aluminum roasting pan. You know, those disposable roasting pans. And shape a little lid for it. And, you know, it works great. To tell you about the Frybake a little bit, it's marketed as something that you can build a fire on top of the lid, as well as, you know, heating up the bottom for baking things. But that's really just not necessary. And if you wanted to put a fire on top of any lid, then you could. But I'm baking loaves of bread in this thing, and all I do is put the lid on. So if you can bake a loaf of bread without heating up a fire on top of the lid, then I can't imagine what else would require you to heat up the lid, because a loaf of bread is a loaf of bread. So if you can bake a loaf of bread just by buying a right size pan made out of the right materials and just making sure the lid's on tight and making sure that you've, you know, got your flame at a good height, then you know, there's really no reason to think that you would need to put a fire on top of a lid for any kind of food. What else can I say about this thing? Yeah, it's better than a Frybake. So if it's better than a Frybake, then it must be the best backpacking pan. It's easier to pack because of its size. It's easier to carry because of its weight. It's easier and nicer to cook with because of its size. It's and this is all in comparison to a Frybake. But of course, it's better than any other pans that are made of titanium or stainless steel, just because it's a nice hard anodized aluminum, which cooks food really well.